So there we are. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're Norfolk developers this evening. My name's Alex. I will be passing swiftly on to Tom for your this evening's session on Flutter. Just a few things from us before we get started. April is full of mobile development and cross-platform, basically. So we're looking at React Native all month, the Wednesday streams at 5:30 every Wednesday. Join Alexio for those. Yesterday was pretty awesome, very interesting. So yeah, join us next week. Including next week as well, Thursday, should you consider Rescript over TypeScript for your next project? So we're looking at React again, and with a potential alternative to TypeScript. Many more in the pipeline. So keep tuned, be on the meetup, on the Twitters, on the Discords, etc. Like I say, React Native, fork it every Wednesday. Join us on the YouTube. Just going to switch over. Every Friday, as usual, Virtual Social Club, 5:30 till late. Hopefully at some point we could do this in the real world, but for now, we are doing it on the Zoom. Join us for games, chat, etc., etc. Hosted by you. A quick shout out, basically, if you've seen somebody you're interested in hearing more from, drop us a message, deploy Alex, as we'd like to refer to it. I will message them, invite them to talk. If you want to talk, if it's the first time talking, we welcome it. Yeah, drop us a line. Quick shout out about sponsors. The User Story, who sponsor our Discord server, the quarterly engagement prize, which did just go to, if I remember right, was it Liam? Liam, yeah, on the Discords. So it's just restarted, so get in there now. Start chatting if you want that voucher. Also, on the subject of the User Story, chapter. Check it out. They've just launched this. Well, I don't think it's launched yet. Launched into beta this week, launching in a few months' time publicly, but create evaluation reports fast. It looks pretty sweet. On the note of sponsors, if you're wishing to sponsor us and get a small update here as well, drop along to Patreon or drop us an email, etc. A quick shout out to our patrons that have literally kept the lights on over the last 12 months. Thank you very much. If you wish to join them, the links will be around somewhere, I'm sure. But anyway, like I say, I'm going to get out of the way because nobody's come here to listen to me chat away. Somebody's, there we go, fantastic. Nobody's come here to listen to me rabbit on. So yeah, I'm going to pass swiftly over to Tom. Thanks, Tom.
Cool, fantastic. Thank you, Alex. So yeah, hey everyone, my name's Tom. I'm going to be talking to you about Flutter 2.0 this evening. Let me just grab my presentation and share my screen. Cool. So yeah, if at any point anyone has any questions, feel free to kind of just shout them out or drop them in the chat, and then yeah, as Alex said, hopefully he can relay them. But yeah, so I've named this talk Flutter 2.0 here, there, and everywhere. And we're going to look at what's new with Flutter 2.0. And the reason we've kind of got the tagline here, there, and everywhere is because one of the main new points with Flutter 2.0 is the fact that it's available on all of a sudden so many more platforms than the last time I gave a talk. The last time I gave a talk, I was doing some live code on an iOS simulator, and then showed that it was also possible for the code to run on web. It's also possible to run the code on Android. It's always been iOS and Android. Web was a kind of new one last time, but this time we've got many more platforms, which is really quite exciting. And yeah, we'll look at what else is new as well as we go on. So yeah, just real quick background on me. I've been a mobile dev for around 4 years now, and I've been fortunate enough to be using Flutter for as long as Flutter has been in production, really, which is just over 2 years. I've built medical, education, and lifestyle apps, and I've done some previous talks for NorDev. These are here, and I will pop some links in to the chat when I'm no longer sharing the presentation. So the itinerary for this evening is looking at what's new, what platforms, who's using Flutter, why you should use it if you're not yet using it. We're going to do some live coding, looking at the cool stuff that comes with the new platforms and the new form factors. We'll look at some tooling updates, because one thing that's great about Flutter is its tooling. It actually makes development life cycles really, really easy, which is great. Point 7, desktop caveats. I've now just realized that's a little bit of a spoiler with the word desktop. But yeah, we'll look at Flutter on desktop and what we kind of need to be aware about when building Flutter apps for desktop. And then at the end, we'll just do some Q&A if people haven't asked questions as the talk's been going on. So just real quickly, again, what is Flutter and why is it special? Well, Flutter is a cross-platform framework for making apps. There's, of course, others such as React Native or Cordova, or there's the traditional native approaches. Oh, sorry, there's also Xamarin. But Flutter's take on it is quite interesting because it's kind of akin to how Unity games work, in the sense that there's a shared kind of stack which is portable across platforms. This is kind of what a typical Flutter technology stack looks like. You've got the Flutter framework at the top, which is what's kind of responsible for, it's a framework you use to construct your UI. And it uses Dart as a language. Then Skia is used as a 2D graphics engine. And those three are the most portable. So whenever you're using Flutter, you're using those three things, but the graphics API and the platform might be different. So you might be running the app on iOS or Android or web or others, and that's the platform part of it. And then the graphics API will typically kind of be one which the platform, is available on the platform. So on iOS, that's Metal. On Android, it has been OpenGL. I'm fairly sure it's at Vulkan now. And then in web, it will use either HTML components or Canvas kit for rendering. But the really portable parts are the Flutter, Dart, and Skia part. So moving on to what's new with Flutter 2.0. Microsoft have started to jump on, but sorry, a police car's going past. Cool, there we are. So Microsoft are now kind of jumping on the bandwagon as well. Flutter is very much a Google project. And if you're still a bit unfamiliar with Flutter, then I recommend going and take a look at one of my past talks where I do give introductions to it. But Microsoft is now getting a bit more involved with Flutter, because Microsoft have got their new product, the Surface Duo, and Microsoft are now kind of actually providing kind of almost direct support for devices which have these kind of foldable form factors, which is really quite exciting. Obviously, Microsoft have got their own cross-platform framework, Xamarin, but the fact that they're getting so involved in Flutter now is it's another big name which is backing it, which is just really great. It's kind of really validating that Flutter is here to stay. Linux users, I know there's a handful of Linux users on the call. Yeah, that's cool. So Ubuntu, Flutter is going to be, it's can I pronounce it? Canonical. But so Flutter is now kind of like the first party way of making apps for Ubuntu, which is really quite cool. So it is still, Flutter is still new in the grand scheme of things, but the fact that such a big OS have kind of said, no, we're going forward with this, is we're recommending you make desktop apps using it, is really quite big, and we'll look at that later. But along with that, we've also got support for running Flutter apps on Windows and Mac as native apps. So not kind of just web apps like Electron, but as native apps, which is really cool. And those are kind of the three main new platforms tonight. yeah, my last talk coming up to a year ago, I demoed web. That's kind of one of the other new platforms, but these 3 platforms are now available and are stable with Flutter. So you don't need to kind of be switching to pre-release versions of Flutter to be trying out these. So you can just, be doing your normal dev as you would on the stable version of Flutter for your mobile apps, and then also try out these desktop platforms as you go, which is really cool. Dart as a language has got some new updates as well. The most notable one is sound null safety. So that's something which kind of more and more languages are kind of getting now. Swift is quite a common contender in the mobile universe that has really good null safety supports, and Dart is kind of following suit with that. So it's basically helping us have far less null reference exceptions. And there's also some performance gains with that. Because at a really low level, with sound null safety, doing a null check requires so many less low-level operations and stuff like that. It's actually kind of cool at a completely different level. So yeah, can't speak too much about that, but yeah, we'll look at null safety and using Flutter with null safety later on. So yeah, these 2 logos, Google AdMob and Firebase. So AdMob is a way to monetize mobile apps, and Google have now brought first-party support for Google AdMob within Flutter, which is great. So it's now kind of saying that yes, you can use Flutter and put ads in it, and not feel iffy that you're using something which ads wasn't previously supported in. But yeah, you can now use ads, and it's now another way to monetize Flutter apps. And Firebase has always had great Flutter support, but it's got even better. A lot more of Firebase's features are available on more of the platforms, and they are actually going to start pushing Firebase into being available on the newer platforms as well, from what I gather, which is going to be really cool. But it's still early days on that. So yeah, Flutter is cross-platform, but what platforms? I think I have actually said them all now, but they are Android, iOS, the web. So all of you web devs on there, on the call, you'll get to see yet another front-end web framework, but it's cool because you can use that and also have a native app as well, and not kind of be like, oh, this is just a web view wrapper app. So yeah, that's really cool. And we've also got the desktop platforms as well now. So yeah, native executables, which can be just easily distributed, and you get a fully running, basically out of the box, pretty good looking app, because Flutter's just put so much effort into their UI components, which is really great. So just moving on to who's using it before we dive into a little bit of live code. These are some companies that are using it. So some big names here. You've got Google in the middle, and these are actually all of their services. I've actually taken this from the Flutter 2.0 event, but these are all of their services where they are using Flutter with it. So Google are using it massively internally as well. eBay are using it for their eBay Motors app, and they've actually done some really good kind of blogs about how they've built the eBay Motors app with Flutter, how they found it, and I've actually got some stats straight from eBay Motors, which I'll share with you in a sec, which kind of just really solidifies why Flutter is such a great platform to choose, no matter whether you're just an indie dev just trying to make apps, or whether you're a large e-commerce site. I mean, yeah, eBay is arguably one of the biggest. It'd be really cool if all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, our main eBay app is using it as well. But just the fact that they're using it for a large percentage of their business is really cool. BMW as well, they're using Flutter a lot, and they've actually got the second largest team behind Google of Flutter developers at around 300 odd, and they're using Flutter for a lot. Again, they've got some really good blog posts about how they found using Flutter. So some more which were announced at the Flutter 2.0 event. Toyota are actually going to use Flutter for their infotainment, which is really cool. must admit, whenever I see a car infotainment thing, unless it's Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, I do always think, what on earth are they using for their UI? And sometimes they are actually a bit clunky, really, although they're touch screens and it's the nice touch. The UI is just a bit clunky, but the fact that Toyota are going to be using Flutter for their infotainment, Toyota are all of a sudden going to start to get really nice infotainment systems, and not just because they're using Flutter and Flutter just automatically makes your apps look great. It's the whole life cycle behind building up UI. They don't actually need to create any like special dev kits as such just to do the UI. They could just use an iPad of a similar, an iPad or a tablet or desktop as similar size, just for building up the UI, testing out the UX, that kind of stuff, before then getting on to the, okay, cool, we're good with the UI. Now let's just link it up with the hardware, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's really cool. That's quite a big gamble. But having said that, I don't know what previous infotainment development has been like. I don't imagine it's the smoothest, but I do imagine it's going to get smoother for them. So yeah, Ubuntu, their new installer is actually made using Flutter. And they're pushing for Flutter to be their main way of making desktop apps. iRobots, that's a company that make the Roomba robots. They've made a kind of like learning app using Flutter where you can like move the robot. It's basically like a digital one of those big ones which you'd see and your teachers be like, oh yeah, these are really expensive, but look, you press these buttons and it goes forwards and right. It's just a digital one of them. Yeah, so those are some big names. Some local names. So yeah, I work for a company called Studious Digital Education, and we make a digital learning platform called Rise. And yeah, we use Flutter for that. So that's running on Android, iOS, and the web. And we're currently rewriting our kind of back-end content entry system in Flutter as well. And we're actually getting a significant amount of shared code. I don't have the stats to hand, but we are actually able to share so much code just by just with everything being Flutter. We're sharing the same like UI components, styles, some business logic, which is really cool. Tap That is a dating app, which myself and my friend James have rebuilt from the ground up in Flutter. And Find My Tea. Shout yeah, there we go, that's Paul. There's a shout out. So Paul has made his passion for tea into a Flutter app, which is really cool. So cool. So yeah, lastly, before some live code, I do think I actually said that before the last section, but this is the last one. Why use it and is it worth it? Well, firstly, you get a single code base for all UI and business logic for whatever platform you're running on. Take Xamarin Native as an example. You will have shared business logic, but you won't necessarily have shared UI. But with Flutter, you do. You can get much faster development cycles because the tooling is just so great with Flutter. The hot reload works superbly. You can choose a variety of different platforms to run it on. So yeah, the tooling is just really great, as hopefully you'll see soon. We do actually have really little platform specific code. That does kind of change if you're going to start delving into making plugins and just plugins for Flutter, then you will actually be touching some platform specific code. But the dev community for Flutter is actually really great at just already making it all for you. So if you want to use Bluetooth, someone's already made the package for you to do that. And now these coming ones are ones which I've taken straight from the eBay Motors blog. And they're actually looking at more of the kind of operations point of view. They actually now have one backlog, one set of meetings, synchronized releases, and they solve problems once because the projects are essentially the same, just the target platform is different. But actually from kind of like a project management point of view, it's actually really cool. And also, yeah, with Flutter, because it's, traditionally you'd have the iOS team and the Android team, or just iOS developer and Android developer. You might have, depending how you're managing your project, you might have different tickets. but they're the same ticket, but just one's for iOS and one's for Android. With this, you don't need to have that because everyone's working on now the same code base. One developer can be working on that screen, another one can be working on another, etc., etc. So that's really cool. Okay, great. So we're going to move on to some live code now. And live code always goes well first time, always. But yeah, so I'm going to show you a real basic app which I've just whipped up, and this is kind of creating a scenario by where I've made an app for mobile, for just kind of assuming iPhones and Android phones, and all of a sudden, great, I found out with Flutter 2.0, my app can run on desktop as well. But there's some usability things which we actually want to improve because we do actually have a much larger form factor to play around with. With the web, we've got the URL bar, so we can do things like deep links. So we're going to play around with that. Firstly, behind this window, I've actually got the app running on 4 different platforms. So this is an iOS simulator, an Android emulator, Chrome, and this is a native Mac desktop app. So that's 4 platforms all running the exact same code. And that in itself is actually just pretty damn cool. I can debug all of these at once. My laptop will scream at me if I do it. So I'm not going to do it. Not to mention the fact I'm also running where is it? That's a Ubuntu virtual machine, which I'll come back to later. Because yeah, we will then run the exact same code on Linux, and we'll see a native Linux desktop app, which is going to be really cool. But yeah, let's dive into this. The scenario app which I've made is a jump logger. So when you go skydiving, you keep track of the jumps you do. So things like where you jumped, what the total number of jumps you've got, the altitude you jump out at, how long you're in free fall, these kind of bits. So it's just a really basic, just basically a digital logbook. So I've got my list of jumps that I've completed here. I can click on one to see some information about it. I've just added in the graph purely just to jazz it up a bit. So yeah, I can view information about this particular jump, just see a graph just because, and then just again more stuff to fill it up, because actually just keeping track of your jumps is quite simple in itself. But yeah, this is just something else. So seeing what jumps your friends have done. So yeah, if I want to create a new jump, I create that button. I click that button down there and say, oh, this is now my 8th jump. Jumped out at 13,000 feet. I was in free fall for 50 seconds. I was under the canopy for 210 seconds. Just quickly fill out some info. And
you've been doing some parachute jumping, Tom.
Yeah, I took up skydiving back in July, and it has been the best thing in the world.
And you skydive in Beccles?
Yeah. They do it at Beccles. Beccles, Peterborough, Nottingham. There's actually quite a lot of places around, but yeah, thankfully there's one just down the road.
I watched my mum jump out of a plane in Beccles.
Oh really? Oh cool. Yeah,
that
cool?
is.
I was just saying that Beccles is in Suffolk. Is it really safe?
Anyway, carry on. Sorry, Tom.
Is that like a Norfolk Suffolk joke? I'll move on. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, cool. Some validation there. But yes, yeah. So I can create a new jump, and then I can go and view it. That's all. That's fine. That's kind of about what you'd expect the UI to be like on a phone. If we take a look at what it looks like on a larger form factor, so this is a native Mac app, and I can resize it however large I want, which is awesome. So yeah, if I view a jump, that doesn't look quite as nice. The graph is a bit big. Bit big. That information just looks a bit stretched. Do I really need a whole screen for that? Perhaps not. I might actually have it as a pop-up instead.
Whilst you're on the screen, Tom, sorry.
Yeah.
Just got a question on the YouTubes. There's no
Yeah,
save
sure.
button. How did you save?
Oh, for the purpose of this, I'll just hit return.
Oh, okay. How would you do
So,
that on the device?
On an actual device, your keyboard would be showing.
Oh, and you can hit done. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Sorry.
Tell you what, we'll add a save button in when I get back to VS Code.
Hey.
Cool. But yeah, so this form, like it just doesn't, using up all the space, it does kind of feel a bit unnecessary. Android is basically the same as iOS, so I won't go and show that anymore. The web is actually basically the same as the desktop app, just it's in Chrome. We can have things like the URL bar can update. I'll change that to 3. Oh, it's now showing us jump 3. I can go back to jump 7. I can like kind of deep link. So if I sent you the link, it would jump straight to my 7th jump and stuff like that. I can go back and I'm now back at the home screen. For the purposes of this, the persistence is just in memory. So if I did refresh, I'd lose any jumps I had. But yeah, there's just a set of 7. But yeah, so yeah, it's fine. It works. Could potentially go to market with it like that, but I'd very quickly want to release an update that just makes it a tad more usable and a tad more form factor usable. So what we'll do, we'll first change it so that instead of coming to a new screen just to fill out the form, on desktop, we'll show up like a modal to fill it out and add a save button. So, do I try something I didn't try when practicing? I don't know. Yeah, let's do it. I'll do side by side and see how much code we can see. If we're not actually able to see enough code, someone shout and I will adjust the screen sizes. Okay, cool. So yeah, this is just VS Code. Again, there's something great with Flutter. You can use most people's favorite code editor. It's incredibly lightweight. It's unlike Android Studio. It won't boil your house or your laptop or eat up all your RAM. And yeah, you've got like as many extensions as you can possibly want, which is really cool.
Oh, sorry, whilst you're on the extensions page, somebody did just ask what plugins you're using. Are you using anything special for Flutter with VS Code?
Yeah, sure. So the main ones to get started is just Flutter. If you just search Flutter, it's by the Dart code publisher. If you just install that, it'll install the Flutter extension and the Dart extension. So it'll just make VS Code work. Have language support for Dart, and yeah, Dart is actually a really nice language to use. But yeah, you then also get loads of Flutter shortcuts, so you can do things like launch different emulators, create new projects, update your packages, and I'll show you some of the dev tools later on when we get to the tooling part. So those are quite nice. There's some other ones which I do have installed, such as Block. This is a state management package, and this extension just basically just adds shortcuts for creating a new block class. But that's a whole different talk. So yeah, the basic structure for this app. Main is the entry point to a Flutter app. Well, actually, as with most applications start with the main method. And you just need a function call to run app, passing in a widget. So in my previous talks where I do give an introduction to Flutter, I make a point of saying that everything in Flutter is a widget, and widgets are Flutter's UI components. And everything from just a button to a piece of text to even a fully fledged screen is a widget. And that's something which we can really take advantage of later on when we start to shift things around and adjusting the UX across different platforms. This app class, we're not actually going to look at this too much. The main things we've got here is just some setup for navigating to different screens and kind of support for navigating on web. If any Flutter devs are on this call and see this, yes, of course, there's some much nicer ways of doing this. This is purely just for the purpose of a quick demo. So yeah, those two files we won't spend much time in. So yeah, when we typically do Flutter projects at work, we split stuff up into a data folder, a domain folder, and a presentation folder. We're going to spend most of our time in in the presentation folder for this part. Again, this is quite simplified. There's not a great deal to this. We've just got 4 screens. This is the home screen we're currently looking at. This is the jump information screen we're looking at. This is the new jump screen. And if we were on the web, that is the jump not found screen, just there. So yeah, just very basic. We then have some reusable components. So we'll just highlight the components. So the new jump form is this set of text fields and soon a save button. Jump information list item is one of these rows here. Jump information info box is this up here. Jump information graph is this graph here. Jump information friends jump list item. Naming things is horrendous in code in general. But yeah, that's just one of these rows here. Jump information friends jumps header is this label here, really, which becomes sticky as you scroll down. And then jump information friends jumps list is this list component here, which has many list items. Cool. So that is, can I move that? There we are. So yeah, those are all of the components and the screens. Yeah, like I said, the first thing I kind of want to do is when I'm on desktop, I don't want to have to navigate to a new screen to enter information. Oh, actually, sorry, that's something I've completely forgot to say, which is really cool. Flutter by default. So yeah, on phones, you don't typically have cursors. You're just using your finger as the touch device. So you just kind of touch things. But when you use Flutter on the web or desktop or platforms where you do have a mouse, when you hover over something which you can click, it changes to a pointer, which is cool. And there's kind of some other subtle platform-aware UX decisions which the Flutter team have made to put into their default components. So straight away, you'll get a fairly good platform-specific feel as soon as you start running stuff on new platforms. Obviously, if you start doing like really custom buttons and stuff like that, you'll have to put a bit more work into to make them feel like platform specific. But it's quite easy to do. But yeah, cool. So yeah, I press this button, and this is on the home screen. I'm just going to hide that. This is my home screen here. So yeah, again, apologies if you're not quite so familiar with Flutter code. Yeah, at the end of the talk, you can go and check out one of my previous talks where I do give an introduction. There's a set of 2 talks where I give an introduction and then I do a follow-up talk where I just talk about a few more concepts, such as navigating and passing data between screens.
I've dropped those links in chat actually on on Zoom, and YouTube
Bro,
people
thank you, Alex.
can find it themselves.
Cool. Yeah, great. So this here, floating action button down here, which is that component, or sorry, that widget, I've got a onPressed function. So as soon as I press this, it's going to perform this code here. And it looks like a very short function, and that's because it is. I assign a variable jump with the result that a screen will pass back to me. So this here, navigator dot push named new jump. Sorry, it's actually really hard to. There we are. This here is I've assigned that string new jump to the new jump screen. So when I ask the navigator for the app, and when you see code in Flutter that has of context, this is basically saying find the navigator for the app and run this method for it. So run push named for the navigator, and the navigator is going to go and find the mapping of our call. The user has asked for the new jump, the screen associated with the new jump string. So go and present that to them. And this here, awaiting it, is basically saying, yeah, push that screen. Then when we come back from this screen, assign the result to this jump variable. If you hover it over there, you'll see that the type is actually of object, but I'm just going to change that and say the type will be of jump. No, that's the wrong place, sorry. So now jump is going to be a jump class, and that's just a class which has the information that's filled out in this form here. So really simple. So yeah, when we come back from that, it's going to add, firstly, if a jump did come back, if I did fill out the form correctly, it's going to add this jump to my list of jumps, and the list is going to refresh. If we don't get a jump back, it's not going to. So let me just start that. So we can also see the benefit of hot reload. Cool, but yeah, on desktop, it makes much more sense to actually show a modal for something like this, because the screen is just a bit too much. So what we're going to do is write a little bit more code. In Flutter, you've got the concept of a dialog, and a dialog is essentially a modal in web dev terms, and it allows you to show something to the user, show a widget. So I'm just going to show some text when we click this. Sorry, that's the wrong one. There we are. New debug session, live coding. Hey, live coding. Oh, I hate Mac sometimes. Yeah, that didn't look great. Cool, there we are. So yeah, we can now see up here saying hello Nordev. That's not looking quite so right, and a reason for that is you typically need to wrap stuff you're going to show in a modal in a material widget. That just provides some context to what widgets you're showing, such as fonts, colors. It's kind of like one of those things which you just accept. I can't actually see it behind your screen sharing. There we are. Cool, great, we can see that. It's not a very pretty modal. Typically, we would use a dialog, yeah, we could use a Cupertino dialog. Cupertino is the name for iOS looking components, and Material is the name for Android-y looking components. What stuff do I need to give that? Don't need to give it a great deal, but it didn't quite work. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, so let's just stick with some text, and we're just gonna make it not quite fill out the entire screen. So we're gonna give it some padding. So yeah, there are, you can see that. I can now see behind it now. I've given it some padding. And oh God. And now we can change what we want to put in here. We don't actually just want text. We actually want our new jump form. So now when we press this, we're now going to see this form, which is great. Because it means that we don't need to go to the whole new screen just to fill out the form. So we can say, oh, this is going to be jump 8. And this is something you won't be seeing, but I just hit the tab key on here. So Flutter has been like, oh, cool, they've pressed the tab key. That's quite common for going to the next form field. So it's just gone down to the next one for me. So we'll fill out that. So yeah, I'll press enter, and it's completed it, but I've not done anything with the result. What I can do is change the code. So instead of getting the jump from a new screen, I'm getting it from this modal. I'm just going to quickly just put stuff in, enter, and that's gone and got it. So we've got two mechanisms for filling out this form, in the modal kind of way or in the new screen kind of way. So we can actually just adapt our code again slightly to change whether we're going to assign jump from the modal or from the new screen. Cool. So I've made a conditional here, but I've just said it's always going to be true. And that's not very useful. What we really want to do is know when we want to use the modal and know when we want to not use the modal. And for that, we need to work out what form factor we're on. So basically, looking at the size, you can kind of consider what we're now about to do as looking at breakpoints in kind of web dev terms. When we want to get the size of the current form factor we're on, Flutter has something called media query. And we use this of context method for finding the current media query information for the app. And then we can look at loads of different stuff about essentially the media we're on. So we can see the size of the screen, we can see whether it's in dark mode or light mode, we can see the text scale factor, all that kind of stuff, which is really cool. You can see whether you're in high contrast, you can get the screen pixel ratio, loads of different stuff. But what we kind of want here is the size, and we want to see, is the size, is the width greater than, let's say 640. Yeah, let's kind of say if you're on anything less than 640, fair to assume you're on mobile. So yeah, if your screen width is greater than or equal to 640, show the modal, otherwise push the new screen. So if we save that, I'm just going to make sure the window is definitely larger than 640. So now when we press that, it's showing us the modal, which is great. If we make it too small, shouldn't happen. Oh no, what have I done? It's not because of that, is it? It might be because of that. Apologies about this. Sorry, just give me 2 seconds to confer with my pre-existing code.
The pain of a live demo.
I know, it went so smoothly earlier.
Well, Chris is complimenting your use of snake case everywhere. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. That's quite a typical casing in Flutter.
I did then realize that it was only limited to the file names.
Yeah. I typically go off a convention of whatever the Flutter team use, and they use snake case. So this here I've just jumped straight to the Flutter to like part of the Flutter source. So I can actually even like put breakpoints in the Flutter source code if I want to start inspecting stuff and see what's going on there, which is really cool.
You want to shift the blame.
yeah, all that. Can definitely use it for that. So sorry about this. That code is literally what I have written. I'm going to run this on Chrome because that's definitely what I used to test earlier. So sorry about that. It's actually quite embarrassing. I'm trying to tout this amazing new cool. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah. Runs on these. Something's basic as showing a screen doesn't work.
Don't worry, Tom. It happens to the best of us.
Cool. Phew. Thanks, Paul. Cool. That's what we were saying. And then when it's smaller. Yep. Right.
To be honest, I'm pretty happy it's crashing in Chrome in the same way as it's crashing in the
me too.
in Mac.
Me too. Me too. This is so puzzling.
There seemed to be some issue with the final. It liked being final earlier. It does not like being not final.
Yeah, so in Dart and Flutter, we typically keep things quite immutable. So, we set most things as final. On like a class, if we seeing as we mentioned that, on my jump class, everything here is final. In typically, you might have things as not final, and you'd be like, "Oh, jump dot date time is today," or update stuff like that. but that doesn't update things like the hash code for the class. So when it's starting to do operations which use a hash code, so like using a hash map, it doesn't update things like that. And when you're comparing an object, even though you might have different date times on it, the objects will appear as being the same, unless you start kind of like overriding how you compare classes. But yeah, again, that's a whole other can of worms. Sorry, I'm just gonna jump over to the branch which has these fixes on. This is far from ideal. Far from ideal. Yeah, this is. It's not working out. Okay, last quick thing, then I'm gonna move on. Okay, cool. So we're not going to do that one yet. We are going to. Oh dear. We are going to instead look at. Let me just change back to the branch. It doesn't have the code I'm about to write on. Okay, cool. I don't have something in the right form factor. Okay, so what we're going to do, when we want to view a jump and it's in.
It's trolling you now.
Yeah, it's. Oh dear, it knows some screen. It knows some screen sharing. When we click on one of these, on desktop, we have enough space to actually just view the information in the side there. So that's what we're going to do, and that's going to work. He says being hopeful. Yeah, I do know how to write code, I promise.
We had somebody recently who was a developer advocate, and he had just video recordings of himself doing the code, and he would just kind of almost faux do live code whilst he was sitting there, and he was just chatting away as his video was playing, basically.
Just unplugs the keyboard.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone noticed. I'd be interested. We should have polled people to see if they noticed that they weren't actually live coding.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Okay, cool. So when we click on one of these, which is one of our jump information list items, we can see we have an on tap function here, and that pushes a route the jump / and then whatever number. So we use URL naming conventions so that out of the box we just have URL support on web as well, which is cool. But yeah, when we're using one of these items in a slightly smaller, in a large form factor, we don't necessarily want to just push a whole new screen. We want to show it on the side here. So what we're going to do is just adapt our UI quickly. So on this screen, we've got an app bar and we've got a body, which is basically the rest of the screen. And the floating action button sits over the body. So for our body, we've said we've got a list view builder here. We're going to change it so the list view builder is wrapped in a row. And inside that, we're going to make sure that the list view takes up all of the available space in the row by using an expanded widget. An expanded widget can sit inside a column. So when you start aligning things vertically above each other, or in a row when you're aligning things horizontally side by side. And then an expanded just make sure that that particular widget fills up all the space. So we're going to see no visual difference here, and that's good. What we now want is a possible selected jump. So we're going to have that jump there. And a cool thing with Dart is that you can do if statements like inside the construction of an array, which is really cool. So we can say, if this jump is not null, then we're going to add basically something else into the array as we're creating it, which is really cool. And there's loads of other really cool stuff we can do with it with arrays. Say like we had a list of widget up here, and we wanted to add the widgets here. We can't just add list of widgets like that because it's now a list in a list, which is not what's expected. But we can just do ... to unwrap it. I think that is actually available in other languages, but yeah, it's actually so useful when constructing UI. Anyway, I'm going to try and speed up the pace a bit. But yeah, so if our selected jump is not null, then we're going to show it on the side. We're going to use a container, and inside I'll come back to why we're having actually no, we're using the container because we're going to specify the width that it will take up. So we'll give the information 350 screen points to take up on the side, and the child will give it will just be the jump information screen. So because the jump information screen is a widget as well, we can pass this around. We can use it wherever we want, which is cool. And just to make that look a little clearer, we're gonna add some decoration. So we're just going to add a little border. So yeah, when we have a jump selected, it'll appear, the information will appear here, and we'll have a border. So now, when we want to select a jump, we're going to alter this widget here to take a function to call instead of it just calling something itself. And we're going to pass that in instead. So I've just created a new class member for this widget and added it to the constructor. And now wherever I'm using this, I'm expected to pass something in for it. So what we're going to see here right now is no visual difference. It's still just pushing, but I'm going to say, we're going to add a check to see the screen size in a sec. But we're going to set our jump property up here to the selected jump. Sorry, I'm slightly rushing a little bit now because we lost a bit of time. yeah, so the reason I've wrapped this assignment in a set state callback, sorry, in a call to set state and pass in a function, this now basically says this home screen widget can be redrawn. Something's changed. We want Flutter to now go ahead and redraw it. So when it redraws and it comes down to this line again, it's going to say, oh, cool, this jump is not actually null. So I'm going to render something. Cool. So when I press on this, the information now appears at the side. And yes, something worked. Something worked. I have a good developer. But yeah, so yeah, that's great. Cool. That condition of just true isn't very useful. So we are going to change that to be, are we, I've rewritten it the other way around. So if we're on a screen less than 10, sorry, if our window is 1024 pixels or less, then push a new screen. Otherwise, just display it. Now with this, I can actually go smaller now that I've got it shown and still push. So we will just alter our condition down here so that if a jump has been selected and the screen is big enough to accommodate it, then great, show it. Cool. Cool. So stuff still functions mostly as it should. Cool, great. That's now pushing the right jump. Cool, awesome. If we are on this screen, but it's wide, it doesn't look quite as neat with stuff being, well, yeah, this graph is just taking up too much space, really. So what we're going to do is just alter our code slightly again. So what we're seeing here are different things in this scroll view. So we've got our jump information info box. We've got our jump information graph. And then we've got our header and our list of jumps which our friends have done. I'm going to refactor this out to just a method just to make the code slightly neater. And I perhaps shouldn't have added everything straight away. Let's just deconstruct this. So now all I've done is just abstracted the code slightly, so so I've got some more space to build up what children should appear in this list. What we're going to look at is, should we show the graph and the info side by side? That's a conditional that we're going to pass into this method in a sec, and we're going to then alter how this looks. So if we do want that to happen, we won't add both children separately. I will be making this code all available at the end. In fact, it actually already is, but don't jump ahead. Okay, cool. So yeah, if we don't want to show the info side by side, then we're just going to show them as individual components. But if we do want them to be shown side by side, we're going to stick them in a row. And we're going to make each of them expand to fill as much space as possible in that row. But because we've got two things trying to fill all the space, they'll actually just play ball and fill half the space each, which is cool. We can change the percentages that they want to take up, but for the purpose of this, we don't necessarily need to. Cool, so nothing's changing here yet. We can pass in, we can now add a conditional to this bool of if the if the window size is greater than or equals 1024, then show them side by side. Otherwise, show them vertically above each other. So now that looks better. We could perhaps like take that down. It basically depends what kind of breakpoints you want, really. Again, when starting to kind of do responsive design with Flutter apps, just go with standard web breakpoints, because you're probably going to end up using Flutter for web anyway. So just kind of stick with the trends of just web breakpoints. Okay, cool. So this is great. We've got it running side by side. But when we go back, if we remember, we were seeing the info in the side, but we were constraining that to only 350 pixels wide. But our code is looking at the entire window width and saying, if it's greater than 1024, which this window width is, show them side by side. What we actually want is just the space which the widget is currently being rendered in. So instead of looking at this, we want to know the space that this screen has got before it's rendered. And the way we can do that is by using a layouts builder widget. And this is, again, just a widget. But instead of taking a child like you're seeing a lot of widgets do, it takes a builder method, which gives you a property called constraints. And basically, when we come to construct our screen here, this constraints field has the available width and height that we're about to render into. So for this scenario, the constraints are actually going to be 350 width. That's your biggest constraint. But when we're on a full screen, we've actually got as much space as the window is going to allow. So instead of using media query, we're going to use constraints.max width. So here on this screen, nothing has changed. But now we're back on this screen, because the space it's got is less, it's just going to show them just like this. So yeah, that's that. What we will do is just add a button below this on the side, so we can view it in full screen if we want. And to do that, we will just wrap this in a column. Give the screen as much vertical height as it wants. So visually, nothing's changing here. This has just been given. It said there may be children above or below you, but take up as much space as you want. But because there isn't anything above or below you, it can take up all the space. But we will now add a button below. So we can then view it in full screen if we want to. Cool, great. I'm really stumped as to why that isn't working for me at the moment, but I don't want to try and debug this anymore on this call. It took up slightly too much time than I wanted to earlier. But yeah, essentially what we were going to see was what we started to see of the form showing in a modal, and us receiving the new jump entity that we've created from that, as opposed to this screen over here. But yeah, this has essentially just been a really quick whistle-stop tour of different kind of considerations when starting to adapt your existing mobile Flutter apps into desktop apps. We've got a lot more screen real estate, so that's great, provided that you use it as you want to use it, or sorry, as users might expect to use when you've got this real estate. Cool, great. So yeah, that's that running on Mac. Let me show you now running on Linux. So this is a horrendous Ubuntu VM. And it's even gone to the wrong screen. You should be able to see Ubuntu. Cool, great. so small. And yeah, sorry, Alex, this is what I meant. The download button doesn't exist when your screen's too small.
Is it behind the dots?
Behind them? No. Let's just make the screen better. Oh, you're kidding me. Oh goodness. I was
need
I
to
was going
scroll it to hit the accept. I accept these changes.
Oh, there we
too
are,
late.
there we are. Oh. It's
Down there. Oh, down that little white box.
that there.
Yeah. Can you scroll to it or anything? Ah, too late.
Oh, can we make this? There we are. See, why do they not show that when it's smaller? Cool. So this is just
Down the bottom. Down the bottom of your screen on the bottom there.
Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, you hero. Let's extract there. Literally anywhere that I can do it. It's gone somewhere. Yeah, I quite like the idea of pre-recording.
That suddenly becomes an attractive option now.
It does very much so. Yeah. Is this just? Oh wow! It was just scaled. Cool. Here we are.
You could pre-record it and then midway through with the webcam on, just walk off to get a drink. It just carries on.
I do very much like that. It will definitely be a strong drink after this performance.
Don't panic, don't judge yourself. So good. It always happens.
Always happens. Okay, few. Of course. So yeah, I've just downloaded the source code for this. And actually I should be able to full screen it now and it should just be okay. It's okay enough. In this project, I can now just run this same command which I would to create a brand new Flutter project. I've already got an existing one, so when I run this, it's only going to create new files that I don't already have. Am I not in the right? Cool. So I've just ran that, and it has now created a Linux folder for me. So this is now like the Linux host code, which I don't ever want to take a look at. But it's got an entry point to a GTK plus host. But yeah, so that's that. And I should now be able to. So yeah, I can choose my target platform to run it on. I've chosen Linux. So it's now going to build the app for Linux and let me run it as a Linux app. It's actually usually quite quick on desktop platforms, which is nice. Also, because it's using all the power of your desktop or laptop, which is typically going to be more than like a phone or a simulator. Actually, I say a phone, like the phones are getting pretty speedy nowadays. Yeah, here we are. So this is it running on Ubuntu. And you'll notice some subtleties here. You'll notice that the font is actually the same font that Ubuntu uses. I'm not quite sure what it's called. There's actually like a whole design name for this. But yeah, that is. Did that work? No, it can't have worked. Is that still too light? I think it's still too light. No, it didn't work. That's going to puzzle me for ages. But yeah. This is a fully fledged Linux app now. I'm sure that weird part was just the virtual machine being weird.
No, that's just Linux.
Oh, that's just Linux. Oh, okay. Okay, cool, great. Well, yeah, cool. In that case, but yeah, cool. So great. One set of code, and it runs on loads of places, including Linux. So if you've never thought about bothering to try to make a Linux app, you can now probably give it a go, and also pick up some expertise for making mobile apps, web apps in Flutter. And yeah, cool. I'm coming straight out of Linux. Cool. Okay, so yeah, I'm really sorry that we actually only really saw like 2 responsive bits. I was really hoping to share a third. But yeah, with the rest of the things I wanted to cover.
I was going to say, we've seen plenty of responsive stuff so far.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool,
Yeah,
good. Cool, great. So next I want to talk about the tooling updates for Flutter. Now, I mentioned Flutter has suddenly got something called, Dart has got null safety. But everyone's existing projects isn't going to have had null safety. So this code that we're looking at here is not null safe code. And if you have a really big project, you may be thinking, oh God, it's going to be a nightmare. I'm going to work out what should be nullable, what shouldn't be nullable. I'm also just going to, actually Flutter has got a command line tool which you can run to migrate, to help you migrate your code, which is awesome. You just need to run command. That command line, which was Dart migrate inside your Flutter project. And it's going to analyze your project and find and basically make assumptions, educated assumptions about what bits of your code should be nullable and what shouldn't. And it does this using some kind of cool techniques, such as looking at existing annotations. So this here I've marked it as required. So this is kind of suggesting that this property is always going to be needed, therefore it should be non-nullable. So it's given us a web link here. And if we come over here, this is now an outline of our project, and it's showing us files, and where it's got a number here is saying, these are some things that you can change. In red, you can drop the @ symbol because required now becomes an actual keyword in Dart as opposed to just an annotation. Up here, it's kind of not suggesting that you need the question mark to insinuate that these are nullable. But down here, because I don't have required, it's saying, oh, we can't always guarantee that someone's going to call this method with a number or a date time. So therefore, this should probably be nullable, which is cool. And it's just going to do a lot of this for us. So yeah, here it's kind of said it's added a question mark for key because I've not made key required, therefore key might not always be there. And that is actually kind of one of the main points about null safety, really. Sorry, one of the main visual differences you'll see with null safety. You'll see more question marks and exclamation marks in places. So yeah, here I'm not initializing selected jump, but I am assigning it elsewhere. I am assigning it, and then other places I'm using it. It's saying, oh, here you can add an exclamation mark there to basically say, at this point in my code, I am confident that selected jump is not going to be null. So just treat it as if it's not null. That can be unsafe. That's you're now kind of relying on your coding ability to make sure that it isn't null before the user runs that code that assumes it's not null. You can add checks around to check if it's null first and then do something different. But yeah, so I'm just gonna say, apply migration, and that's gonna migrate my code to null safety to be fully null safe. It's gonna say some stuff's broken to start with. It did miss 1 or 2, but 1 or 2 I don't think is all that bad. It's probably going to need to be that. I think that's new as well, actually. You can do first. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. We're just going to create a new jump. Up and now all of this is required. There, that's better. This here is saying it can't be null, so therefore you don't need that. You're always going to get a jump, which now I'm looking at the kind of context of this code that I'm in isn't necessarily the case. The jump might not exist. So yeah, you probably would need to revisit this code and adapt it a bit more. But yeah, so again, that's kind of saying the jump is always going to be there. That's just an unused imports. But yeah, so yeah, that's it, migrating you to null safety. So the code is now running in null safe. When you compile it, you'll get some performance improvements because when you do null checks, there's like now less low-level operations that need to run. So that's cool. Another thing with tooling, you'll notice that apart from the unused imports, it's saying that the flat button is now deprecated as is raised button. Flutter has a tool, has a command line command you can run. Just trying to refresh it. Flutter fix. So you run Flutter fix and it will not work. Dart fix. Cool. So yeah, it's going to find deprecated uses. I've only got 2. It shouldn't take that long. Nothing to fix, really.
Presumably, raise button belongs to Flutter, not to Dart, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Flutter.
Just a bit conscious of time.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, cool. Well, okay, instead of that, we should be able to use the light bulb. The light bulb isn't working for me. Okay, yeah, that's not working out quite so well. But yeah, just hovering over that, it did tell me. That's that. Cool. So yeah, I mentioned some of the other dev tools. We've got a widget inspector, which lets us view an entire hierarchy of our widget tree. That smaller. So we can like tap on stuff and start inspecting information about it. So you can imagine this to just like the dev tools in Chrome and stuff like that. But you can start running some performance profiling if you want. You can let's see CPU profiling, memory stacks or heaps, other stuff, which is really cool. You can do, if you're worried about frame rate issues, you can toggle this performance overlay. And whenever your app is redrawing, you can see information about how long it's taking to compute stuff that needs to be on the screen. So you can compute the layout, which is this bottom like continuous bar chart. And this top one is how long it takes a GPU to render it. So yeah, if you're doing some really complex stuff, you might come here and say, oh yeah, this is causing the UI to be laggy. You can look at you can toggle debug painting, which kind of shows the bounds of different boxes. So I've actually got quite a lot going on here now. Let me turn that off. And let me turn that off. But yeah, you can now start to see the bounds and outlines of different widgets. If you've got animations and stuff like that happening, you can now see certain widgets have like this extra box around them, which is changing color. And this is insinuating that a widget within this bounds is redrawing. So you can find out where certain widgets are redrawing more often than they need to. Here it somewhat suggests that actually too much is redrawing. Actually, I'd probably only expect just this row to redraw. But yeah, you only kind of need to worry about that when you're doing some really like complex stuff. There's a lot of stuff to normally use. Yeah, you can change things like changing what platform it's going to suggest it's running on. So that's kind of particularly useful when you're like debugging on Android. Say you only have an Android device, but you want to see how it might look on iOS with some of iOS's subtleties. You can use that. But yeah,
overlay, does that work on? Chris just asked, and I was wondering the same. Does that work on web?
The one where it shows the performance graphs doesn't. But you can use Chrome's built-in FPS one for that. The one where it shows which ones are redrawing, I do believe does actually. I'm just running it. Yeah, kind of recently we've kind of looked at performance of some of our apps recently and kind of spotted places where we can minimize redraws and get back performance. And yeah, you can. So yeah, to me, this suggests that basically nearly the entire screen is redrawing just as I'm hovering over these, which does feel slightly wasteful. I'd need to properly look into that, but I'm actually just using out-of-the-box components. So yeah, when it's all out-of-the-box stuff, the Flutter team have performance tested them for a benchmark level of performance. So yeah, those are kind of the main tools that we use really. Then the last main thing I want to talk about is the caveats that come with now Flutter and Flutter for desktop. Typically, if you've been making a phone, and let's take Paul's Find My Tea, for example, I believe you've got maps and location services in the app, but now does do desktop platforms have these location services available? Potentially not. And that then kind of goes with some other things that you might come to expect from mobile, such as if you're making a banking app and you use like Touch ID or Android fingerprint, that kind of stuff, you now need to start expecting your app to not always have these available. Same with things like in-app purchases. In-app purchases is something which is definitely available on Android and iOS, but when it comes to the web, you've actually got luckily you've got complete freedom to use whatever payment system you want. You don't need to be tied into Apple's and Google's awkward to use services. Some other ones might be gyroscopes and sensors, that kind of stuff. So when you're perhaps if you're an agency and you start getting clients saying, oh well, yeah, we know our app can run on like the web and desktop and everywhere now, you might have to start just easing their expectations of just magically just having your app which uses your gyroscope in-app purchases to just run on desktop. You would need to do some adaptations. But when we're talking about quite kind of like vanilla stuff where an app is just communicating with an API, doing some like local persistence, that kind of stuff, then great, all of a sudden it's just going to be available on several different platforms. But yeah, so those are some considerations. And while these desktop platforms are stable, it's the kind of Flutter UI part, which is the Flutter framework part, which is stable and running Flutter apps on them. There's other parts which haven't been, other bits of work which haven't been completed yet, which I might consider to be needed for production ready, such as platform views. And when I talk about platform views, take a map or a web view on Android or iOS. When you use them in Flutter, Flutter is basically using a native Android or iOS web view or Google Map, and we're just bringing it into Flutter's widget tree. That functionality hasn't been completed yet for desktop platforms. So if you are expecting to be able to use web views on desktops from as of now, you won't be able to just yet, but that is something which a lot of devs do see as quite crucial. So it will come. And with the Ubuntu team really pushing Flutter for Linux, I actually think Linux will probably be the next quickest platform to get that, possibly Mac. Don't hold me to that. This is kind of based on how I read GitHub issues. But so yeah, if you, it's going to be great when it all comes together, but it's there to do right now. And yeah, that's kind of a sum up of Flutter 2. There is, so you got desktop support, whistle stop tour, very whistle stop, a little bit broken. I do apologize about that. But yeah, so you got desktop support, more big names are getting involved with it and kind of really solidifying the fact that this is here to stay. This isn't just another Google gimmick, it's here to stay. More platforms, more ways to monetize and use apps. Tooling to help you keep current, to help you keep your apps up to date instead of just letting them just keep using like 2-year-old dependencies or out of date stuff. So yeah, it is a big release. And yeah, it is exciting that Flutter is definitely very much here to stay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's kind of me done. So I will open up the floor to any questions.
Awesome, thanks very much. That was awesome. There's been quite a few questions already, but get them in while you can. There was a comment earlier, actually. I was going to make the suggestion when you were talking about Ubuntu's font. It is quite easy to remember. It's called Ubuntu.
Oh, cool, great.
Hamza confirmed that over on live chat.
Cool,
A question in from Kev. He might have missed the initial bit, but the VS Code extensions you're using, have there been any good extensions for Flutter on VS Code over Android Studio?
Ooh, good question. So basically everything you can do in Android Studio, you can do in VS Code and vice versa. Some things like the dev tools where you have the widget inspector, that's, while you saw me run that in Chrome, that can actually, you can change your settings. And I think by default that will actually open up in VS Code and Android Studio respectively. Personally, I prefer VS Code just because it's a bit, Android Studio, it does feel a bit heavier.
Yeah, we'll take that.
Yeah, and then when you're kind of mixing with like other languages, like just VS Code just has support for whatever languages you wanted to have. So switching between them is just nice and easy.
The wrap component, right-click options from a VS Code extension. Is the wrap component right-click options from a VS Code extension? So the right-click extensions, is that just from Flutter as the Flutter extension as well?
Yeah, so when I believe that was when I was, if I just share my screen again.
Sure.
So yeah, that'll be here when I either use the light bulb or just the VS Code shortcode of command dot. Yeah, these come from the, sorry, I'm not sharing. I thought I was sharing. Cool, here we are. So yeah, either from the light bulb or pressing command or control if it's on Windows or Linux, and full stop. Yeah, these come from the Flutter extension, and these just let you do first. Yeah, wrap with widget. Just now gives you the placeholder to type whatever widget out you want, for example. But there are some other common ones which people might use down here if you want, which is cool. You can do stuff like swap with parent, which is cool. If you wanted to swap them around quite easily, or even remove one further down, but kind of basically replace it with child and remove it, which is kind of cool.
Swap parent and child seems like a straight. Why would you want to do that?
It might be that you might want your take like say you want a background color and you want to pad around that color, but you've put the padding instead. So instead the padding's padding the child. It's stuff like that. Again, because widgets can be placed inside each other and stuff like that. For the most part, they're going to work wherever, but sometimes the ordering does matter. Sorry, I say sometimes the ordering matters. For the most part, the ordering is going to matter.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
We've got a couple of questions around architectural patterns and directories. So keep your share up, perhaps. So question: what's a good architectural pattern? MVVM, MVC, etc. We've actually, tying into that question, got another question around state management libraries.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, you could honestly spend about a month looking at different state management solutions. That is something which is both. So yeah, Flutter's very open, which is great because it means that people can come up with state management solutions which are appropriate for their needs. But what isn't quite so great is that there's now just so many, and for newcomers, I will completely admit, trying to work out what state management solution is going to be best for you, it's actually a bit of a minefield. Not going to lie. So yeah, some of the ones which were mentioned, MVVM, MVC, I don't use with Flutter. The one that I've used the most with Flutter and I'm very comfortable with, and I like its approaches, it's called Block, and that's an acronym for Business Logic Component. and that it basically assumes that all of your business logic is going to, for the most part, be asynchronous. And because stuff with mobile is typically always asynchronous, like all of your API calls are going to be asynchronous. Using the camera might be asynchronous. It allows you to it's actually really hard to describe, but it allows you to basically always assume that your business logic is happening asynchronously, and it works with events. So you will add an event to your business logic component saying, oh, load my messages, for example. Then the business logic component will kind of update its state. It will kind of say, oh, my state is now loading. I'm loading your messages. It will then fire off the asynchronous call. Then once that's come back, it will then say, oh, cool. My state is now, oh, they've loaded successfully. So now your code can continue on assuming that the message is loaded successfully, or it could come back with a failure state, at which point you can adapt your UI to kind of say, oh, it's gone wrong. You might show like an alert dialogue or something like that. But yeah, it's one which we've got on with really well. It can feel like there's a little bit of code bloat, but it does allow for just quite nice, easy abstraction of loading stuff in, presenting it, or presenting failure states. But yeah, state management, that could easily be like a whole week's worth of talks.
Yeah, for sure. Somebody needs to ask Alexio that same question on Wednesday for React Native Lab.
Yeah.
Cool. Since people of all programming backgrounds are going to Flutter, what is it? Wait, we covered. Oh no. What is a good folder structure? So I noticed quite similar to React Native, there seem to be kind of platform dependent or platform specific folders. Those are for your kind of Gradles and your pods, I'm assuming. But is there a
yeah, so let me just quickly show a file structure. Cool. So this is the root of a Flutter project. I'm just deleting that. Well, I couldn't find the download button on GitHub on the emulator, zipped it up, but it was like a 400 megzip file. That's just because it had all like the build and like debug symbols and stuff like that. Actually, this folder is incredible. What goes into source control is minimal. But yeah, so you've got a folder for each of your target platforms. So you've got Android, iOS, Mac OS, web. If I had Linux and Windows enabled as well, it would have those for them as well. But lib is where you spend most of your time. Lib is like the Dart, kind of where the Dart code lives for a given Dart project. And a Flutter project is also a Dart project. And there's actually loads of different ways that you can structure your folder structure. When you kind of get down to your Flutter code, it's now actually take any other project that you might have where you've got business logic, like repositories or services, and you've got presentation like stuff, like screens or UI components. Basically, look at existing projects that work for you and kind of roll with that, to be honest, I'd say. We found one which works well for us, and that is splitting stuff up into data, domain, presentation. And our projects at Studios have kind of got quite large, so we now split stuff up into features. We might have a core for them. That's just complaining because files have been renamed. They might have features. So here we might have a messages feature, and in here would then replicate that structure. So presentation, data. So yeah, in presentation you might just have your screens, and you might have a messages screen, and that would be your full screen widget. But then you might have components. Yeah, I did spell that right. then in here you might have your new message text field or a message row. Yeah, kind of akin to this is kind of how we found it to work and scale reasonably well. You know, we might do like subfolders if we're suddenly starting to get quite a lot of like subcomponents. But yeah, presentation as well with our Flutter widgets go. The main would be where we'd stick entities for given features. So that would just be an entity like class. We might then have a repositories, and this is where we'd put like a this would be where we'd make an interface for our repository. What do I call it? iMessages. Yeah, if you're familiar with other languages, you'd probably imagine I would write interface that actually in Dart, all classes can implicitly be used as an interface. If we had class, my class, I can say that my class 2 can extend my class, or it can implement it and yeah, take that declaration. So there's now no longer distinct, you know, I could just call this messages repository if I wanted to, and have some like base implementation stuff there. And then when I come to, I might get my messages from Firebase, or I might get it from my API. I can then do that's where we'd then use our data folder and have a Firebase messages repository. Here would then this would implement, I did rename it to just that. This is kind of getting on to how we close to how we might architect a project. We do still keep things as abstract as possible, so we're doing interfaces. So we can just like hot switch stuff out for mock implementations of repositories if we want. And then yeah, data is basically the kind of implementations that might use a data source like Firebase or our own API or stuff like that. But yeah, to whoever kind of asked that question, basically whatever works for you will work for a Flutter project. But yeah, we've done several now where we have found that they have started to scale. So we've had to try and find ways to make them scale well, and kind of splitting stuff up by feature does work well. We found, but yeah, your mileage may vary. It is actually just whatever works for you.
A massive thanks for that answer and a great explanation. Cool. So
cool.
It certainly works for them. Got a question in Zoom now to ask whether or not you've got a Medium or blog.
Medium or blog? Oh, good question. I do have a. When was the last time I updated my Medium? It's one of those things I do keep meaning to go ahead and write more. Let's look at my stories. Oh, that's a draft.
Seeing the drafts now, seeing under the hood.
Yeah. So you can see. Yeah, I've done a few drafts. I haven't published one in a recently reasonable length of time. It is something I keep meaning to do. I have PubDev is where you find any Flutter packages or Dart packages you want. Yeah, I do have,
including block by the looks of it down the bottom right there.
Yep, block. So yeah, block. You can, yeah, it's all nice. It kind of describes it neatly. Yeah, there is of course others like React people. There's Redux.
Chris just pointed that out as well.
Oh, cool. So yeah, you can use Redux patterns.
Run away. Run away.
Yeah.
Reducers of the way, Chris.
Again, it is very much whatever works for you. There is an MVC one I mean that is wordy. That is wordy. You've got to put some.
There's no beautiful
dedication.
pictures either. I'm not. No,
Yeah, I
no,
know.
they've lost me.
Yeah.
They've lost me already.
Exactly.
Where are their badges? They didn't have badges at the
Yeah,
top.
I know. Riverpod is a new one, which is kind of getting more momentum and popularity. It's a evolution of kind of one of the most popular Flutter packages. I'm not going to call it's an evolution of something called Provider. I wouldn't call Provider state management. That's called App Lock, and it's a widget which lets you protect your app. So when you kind of like, you're on your app. You go to the home screen and come back. It'll then present you with a lock screen and stuff like that. So yeah, that's you to do that. It has actually recently kind of gone up in popularity, so I've been updating it. But no, blog wise, it is something that I do need to keep on top on. I will admit that. I sometimes tweet some cool Dart stuff.
I was going to say, you're on the tweets, aren't you? On the Twitters.
Yeah. Oh,
Underscore Tom Dev.
Underscore Tom Dev. Yeah, that's right. So yeah. I tweet and share some cool Dart and Flutter stuff.
All right. Well, I think that just about covers it.
Cool, awesome. I did get a private message from one of my colleagues, Emma, saying that she's managed to fix the issue I was having. So I'll correspond with her about getting that fixed into the GitHub repo, which I'll share once that's fixed. So
that was the crash earlier on that first one.
Yeah,
Nice.
It seems to be. So yeah. Thank you for that, Emma. I owe you cake when we're back in the office.
If you wouldn't mind sharing that in the Discord, we'd love to see what the issue was.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We'll do that. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to turn off the YouTubers now and stop going live out over there. If I can find it wherever I've put it. Where is it? Okay. Thanks, YouTube peoples.
Thank you.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, smash the likes buttons, that sort of thing. Those are the things that YouTubers say. See you later. Bye.